This is Rick Hansen, host of the Amazing Greats podcast with our guest, award-winning cinematographer, Michael Lienau.
From the heart to the mic, on the field, on the stage, faith in they step as they turn the next page. Athletes, actors, musicians, authors, and more, sparking the flame, lifting up Jesus unashamed of his name. Life stories of struggle, redemption, and grace. Victories rising from a broken place. Legends of life with a purpose to show how God shows up when you let him flow. Amazing grace, shining bright, living the faith in the spotlight. Hearts on fire, now let it go. Turn it up, it's time to start the show.
We are live both from Fox Island, where I'm at, and Camano Island, which is also in Puget Sound, but farther north than I am, with Michael Lienau, who is world famous for a whole lot of reasons. And I did my research on you, Michael, and I just kept coming up with new stuff. It was like, oh my gosh, look at this. Oh my gosh, more stuff. So it's been incredible to kind of learn about your story. And I'm excited to share that with our Amazing Greats audience. So let's get rolling. So you are a cinematographer. You have been since age 9, as I understand it. And that's where you got your start. But you're most known for creating the documentary called The Fire Below Us, or Living with the Fire Below Us, which is a documentary on Mount St. Helens, which blew in May 18th of 1980. Many of our viewers here on the podcast probably weren't alive then. But many of them were, and I was one of them, and everybody's got their story. What were you doing on May 18th of 1980? So let's start, though, your story with the young lad, Michael Lienau, who grew up in Southern Oregon. So start us there. How did you get started as a video fanatic?
Yeah, thanks for having me on your show, Rick. Appreciate this opportunity. So, my mother made home movies of us boys when we were growing up. I had 2 younger brothers, and they literally made us seasick to watch because she was always moving the camera around. So I said, Mom, stop, let me try it. But I didn't want to make home movies. I wanted to make real movies. And so I made my first movie, and I got so excited about it. And I checked out a library in our elementary school library about how to make fun movies. And it had little magic tricks you could do, like I could make my little brothers disappear. So I was hooked. It was really, I don't know, I really believe it was God leading me into what he had for me in my destiny. And so I went to my mother. I said, Mom, I want to make movies when I grow up. And I remember she said to me, then you need to pray to Jesus and ask him if that's what he wants you to do. Because I don't care if you're a garbage truck driver or you dig ditches, as long as you do it for Jesus. And that really stuck with me. And so I just prayed, God, if you want me to make movies, then you open the doors for me. And I had this great English teacher in about 7th or 8th grade who let us write scripts and make movies for extra credit. And then she would show those movies in the classroom or in the cafeteria at lunchtime. And the television station found out about that. So one day I had a note that I had a visitor in the principal's office. I thought, uh-oh, what's going on? And so I went to the principal's office, very scared. And it was this very famous radio newsman in our community. And he was looking for a cameraman to go with him to news events to film for him. He had gone to the high school. High school said, we don't have anybody here who's interested, but there's a kid over in junior high making movies. So at age 13, this NBC affiliate in Medford, Oregon hired me, 13-year-old kid.
Oh my gosh.
To
Wow.
shoot TV news with this news reporter. And so I did that all through junior high and high school, and they mentored me. This news director and assignment editor over at KMED TV, and they gave me all the free film I ever wanted. They let me practice with it, and they were very kind and very generous, especially helping out a young man that was interested in filmmaking.
Yeah.
I didn't want to get stuck in TV news, but guess what? My first job right out of high school was working for a TV station.
Okay.
So, and my father was a nuclear physicist, and he wanted me to pursue a career in energy. He said that's where the future is in energy, and that he wanted me to go to college. But I had more of a creative brain. I wasn't that good at math. So I took this job just to more to appease my dad than anything else. But I learned a lot. I learned a lot about life, probably a lot of things I didn't want to learn about humankind and just how nasty things can become and just all, reporting all the bad news every day.
Yeah.
And so I got really depressed about that until one night I saw there was a terrible accident, very several fatalities involved in it, and I was very depressed about my job. And I turned on the television about 4 a.m. and I heard this guy talking about how he was starting a good news television station. I thought, I want to be part of good news. And it was Pat Robertson talking about this new
Oh,
network he was building called CBN and CBN News. So I
oh
wrote him a
my.
letter. I said, I'm a news cameraman. I want to come and work for you. And I just got a form letter back saying, we're not hiring at this time. We're still building the center and all of this. Well, then my next step was to go to film school. So I was researching film schools and I found this one in California that I wanted to go to. And that was my plans in the next few months to go to this film school. And in the back weather section of the newspaper, there was this article about seismic tremors around Mount St. Helens that might lead to something volcanic. I don't know, something about that article made me think I want to be there. Maybe it was the newsman in me. Maybe it was the fact that I've been living in the Pacific Northwest and all these volcanoes around us, and they all seem pretty dormant to me, but this one was doing something. And so I was drawn to what was happening. These are early days in March and April of 1980. And so I went up to my camera and started filming some of the very early ash and steam eruptions that were happening. I caught one big eruption and I was very close to it. We had been escorted in by the Forest Service, and I sold the footage to ABC News, and I was hooked. I was like, something big is going to happen here. I just knew it. And so I spent a lot of time there waiting for that. And guess what? May 18th, 1980 happened. Mount St. Helens erupted in this cataclysmic eruption. And fortunately, I wasn't there. And so I went up there right away with my camera, started filming the devastation around the mountain. And I called this production company in Seattle that we had previously made contact with and asked them if they needed any help. And they said, yes, we need a cameraman to go to Boeing Field and follow that black ash cloud as it's going across the state. Well, in those days, nobody knew that that was not a smart thing to do. So I went to Boeing Field, got in this helicopter, it was all warmed up and ready for me. As soon as I got there, we took off and started flying into the black cloud. We flew across Seattle and over the mountain range, and then we saw the black cloud and flew in it. Made the pilot very nervous. So he landed in a restaurant parking lot in Vantage, Washington. And I pointed my camera up in the sky, and I filmed it turning day to night. And it was just like a blanket going over the
Oh
sky.
man.
And so the pilot
Wow.
said, "This is nuts. Let's go back to Seattle." So we started flying back, and the engine quit and the helicopter. Now, when you're in the air and the engine quits, it's pretty scary. He said,
Yeah.
"Relax. I had to do this all the time in Vietnam." And so we're coming down in an auto rotate, and he sees I-90, and we actually land right on Interstate 90. And
Seriously.
fortunately,
Wow.
the state patrol had already closed the freeway, but they were not happy with us landing our helicopter on the freeway. So they came up and then got a tow truck and got the helicopter out of there. And they took me into town, and I rented a car. I drove back on Interstate 90, being totally closed, totally blackout. And I felt like the last man on earth. There was no cars. It was very scary driving in through this thick ash. I got back to Seattle. The producer grabbed my film, went to LA, was on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson that night. So my film was on Johnny Carson.
Oh
And then he
my.
came back. He said to me, "I really like your filming style. I want you to go into the volcano with me." I'm like, "What does that mean? Go into the volcano with you?" I called my mother and said, "What do you think?" And she says, "That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard you say you want to do, but I'll be praying for you." So I got her approval through prayer. And
Wow.
so we made plans then a few days after the big eruption to go in and be the first camera crew to go in and film the devastation around the mountain.
You and a group of was there a group of folks that went in with you then? People
Yep.
you knew or not knew?
Yeah, there was a production company in Seattle. I just met the producer, director of that production company, and then my friend Joel was a sound man, so he hired him. I was the cinematographer. There was a still photographer, a very famous still photographer, and a grip, somebody who carried all the extra equipment. And our plan was just to go in for 4 hours on one day, film around where we thought Harry Truman had last been, but we didn't know that the whole mountain had come down and buried all of that area under hundreds of yards of volcanic debris.
Hmm.
And so we went in there, thinking that okay, if we need to get out of here, we have a ground to air walkie-talkie, we have a plan A, plan B, plan C. Well, I'll never forget what it was like to fly in there. And the first thing I noticed is it was deathly silent. There was no sound. I was used to growing up in the Pacific Northwest where the trees were blowing and you could always hear rustling of the leaves. You could always hear birds and animals and things, but you couldn't hear anything. It was deathly
Hmm.
silent. It was like we came into the upside down. If you ever saw Stranger Things, that's what it felt like. It looked
Oh
like
man.
that.
Yeah.
And ash was still blowing around and it was very eerie. And we kind of ended up walking around in circles. We didn't realize that, but the heavy magnetism in the ash caused our compass to literally spin around in circles. And we ended up walking around in circles and got disoriented
Oh.
and we were lost.
Oh
And
my
we didn't even
gosh.
know where really to catch our helicopter ride out. And so we also left the batteries on the ground air walkie-talkie. And we had no communication with the helicopter. So we were forced to spend the night. And there was a full moon that night. Came down, it bounced off the grayish ash, and it was just like a very scary movie set, like a vampire was going to jump out of a corner at
Oh
us any
man.
minute.
Yeah. No kidding. At this point, are you thinking this has now become a life and death kind of scenario that you're
No,
involved in?
not yet. We thought, well, in the morning we'll touch base on a helicopter and we'll get out of there. But then that next day was very interesting, and we ended up really trapped in there and not able to get out. And so we were forced to spend another night there. Now, this second night was May 25th, and it was at 2:39 a.m., May 25th, that Mount St. Helens erupted in the second largest eruption, and we were right underneath it when it blew. People heard the blast 300 miles away. We didn't hear it at all. It shot right over our heads. It was totally silent where we were. And the sound boom went all the way up, hit the stratosphere, bounced off that, and then people hundreds of miles away heard that. And for 7 or 8 hours, we looked up and the sky was bright colors because the static electricity and the ash created these 3 to 5 mile long sheets of lightning, and the lightning flashing through the ash created these very effervescent colors like green and orange and purple and pink, and it just did this all. And we thought any minute the volcano is going to wipe us out. It's just going to wipe us out like it did all the other people.
Hmm.
And so I, I really didn't. I grew up going to church. I grew up in a family that was Christian. Went to a very traditional church, but I really didn't know how to connect with God. All I knew how to do was pray, God help. That's all I knew. And I started doing some real serious soul searching then. And the next day was really miserable because when the volcano erupted, the temperatures plummeted to freezing.
Oh.
And not only all this ash came down on us, and as it was coming down on us, it became increasingly difficult to breathe. And I remember thinking, we're going to be buried like the people in Pompeii. And I prayed, God, help me breathe. Another very simple prayer. And pretty soon it started raining, and the rain mixed in with the ash, and it came down like wet, hot mud falling from the sky, which is better. It cleared out the air so we could breathe. But then it started snowing and raining with this weather system that it sucked in, and it just became this slurry of hot, wet, and
Gosh.
mud, cement-like substance, and became very difficult to walk in. And by this time, we'd already been in there for 2 full days, and we were only planning on being there for 4 hours. And we had
Yeah.
no food, No, we had one canteen of fresh water and five
Man,
of us on the crew. And we had one little baggie of gorp mix, peanuts and carob mix. That's it. That's all we had. And that was gone after the first few hours,
and
really.
of course, no vegetation. There was nothing
There was
around
absolutely
to,
nothing there.
yeah.
But there was fresh artesian water bubbling up out of the ground. And it's because all these glaciers had come down and they were buried under this hot ash and it was forcing it up through the ash. And there's these little geysers of fresh water. And so we would just put our canteen there and drink the fresh water. So we were very fortunate to have that. But we were also very cold, very freezing temperatures at this. We were up in the Mount Margaret area. It was freezing.
The visual that I have of the in the documentary is that of the two trees that cross. Was that at this particular point? It looked like a cross on a hillside.
The new eruption draped the mountain with a heavy fog, inhibiting any search and rescue. On that third day, the National Guard called the families of the film crew to say that they were missing and presumed dead. But for Lienau and the other crew members, the ordeal was only half through.
Every hour seemed like an eternity up there. Each step became increasingly more difficult, and we would get stuck in the ash. And as we fell through it, it would burn my feet, my legs, all the way up to my hip. The more that we tried to get out, the more we realized that we were prisoners. Slowly, it was dawning on us that we were becoming our own story.
The hot, cement-like mud melted boots and clung heavily to clothing, draining even more energy from the fatigued crew. Crawling up and over the charred, splintered forest now became a living nightmare. On the evening of the fourth day, they attempted to make camp just a few miles from where they had begun.
Every bone, every muscle in my body was aching, and all I wanted to do was lay down and go to sleep. I remember staring down at the fire and just seeing a mental flash of a helicopter. And that startled me. And I ran out to the edge of this ravine, and for the first time I saw the Green River 2,000 feet below me. And a few minutes later I saw the little red lights on a helicopter. But they were 2,000 feet below us, looking down. And when I saw them leave, I saw leaving with them all chances of getting out of there that day and maybe ever. And that's when I fell down on my hands and knees. I said, Lord, I'm 20 years old. I'll dedicate the rest of my life to serving you if you get us out of this mess we've gotten ourselves into. I heard this voice audibly speak to me, and it said, Michael, look up to your left. It scared me because there was nobody standing there. And I saw all those downed trees, and one of them was still standing, and it appeared to me that the branches were broken in the shape of a cross. I yelled to the other guys. I said, hey, you guys, those helicopters are going to come down from up there. And they told me, Michael, you're crazy, you're hallucinating. But it just seemed like a few minutes, and I saw flop, 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 flop. I saw the blades rise over that spot where my eyes were focused on like a target. And they didn't expect to find us or find us alive. As the helicopter was lifting up off the ground, I felt very humbled. It was the beginning of a lesson in life and a lesson in faith that I'll never forget.
We were physically exhausted, and all I wanted to do was lay down and go to sleep. But we were also, we talked about hypothermia and how dangerous it was. And we tried to keep everybody awake, but we were just fighting fatigue and exhaustion. And because we had been trapped in there now for going on 3 days now. And I remember this one point where we were traveling over these trees. It was so hard to get over this terrain because like there'd be these large like banks of ash that had been blown into the hillside. And then there's trees and snags underneath that ash. And I think because I was the youngest, maybe they made me go first on those, but they would say, you go across there, if you make it, then we'll follow your track. If you don't, we'll find another way. And so one time I actually fell through all the way up to my hips and I couldn't get out. And it was still because the volcano is 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit when the ash came out of it. and it was still very hot under that ground. And so the soles of my boots were melting, and I
Oh,
had to the soles actually broke off, and I had to tie them back together again with twine. And there was one point where I was trapped, and my friend had to crawl on all fours to come and help dig me out. And then we had to really go on all fours trying to crawl through that. So that's just how difficult it was. And you have this whole huge forest, and every tree is laid down. You had to climb up and over and around these trees, and it was incredibly difficult to try to get anywhere. And here we are trapped really in ground zero, right where the major destruction from the volcano had happened, and we were trapped. We could not get out of there. But I was physically exhausted. I was 20 years old. I had a lot of energy in those days, but I was so exhausted. Every muscle, every bone, ligament in my body was aching. And
oh,
at
man.
one point I actually leaned against a tree with my backpack on, and I like fell asleep or something. But I had this vision, and I saw this man coming across this ash field, and he was carrying one of those broken trees. And as he got closer, I saw he was very badly wounded. He had chunks of flesh hanging off his face. He was all bloodied and beaten up, and just really a bloody mess. And as he got closer to me, I realized that it was Jesus on the way to Calvary. And at one point he stopped and stared right at me, and his eyes just pierced right into my eyes. And as he did, I just felt this tremendous surge of life come into me. And I woke up from this dream or whatever I was experiencing there. And I had like a full breakfast, a full night's sleep. I had just full energy. And I started hiking, and I found this little cave. And the other guys followed me, and we crawled into this cave. It was a cave of trees, been blasted against the side of a hill and created this little pocket. So we were able to crawl under that and get away from some of that weather and try to manage to put some twigs and branches together to make a fire. It was really difficult to make a fire because everything had been blasted off the trees, and it was so wet and muddy that it was hard to start a fire. But so for the first time, we're able to make a little fire there and kind of regroup in a way. But when I had that experience, I had this feeling of floating away from my body, and that's when I had that vision of Jesus walking across that ash field. And it was an encounter with Jesus that I'll never forget. It's like it happened last week. It just really changed my life because it made what I'd been learning about in Sunday school and whatever very real to me. But I really didn't know the Lord. And even there at Mount St. Helens, the thing that scared me the most wasn't the fact that the volcano could erupt at any minute and wipe us out. It was a fact of I did not know that if I was to die there, if any second it would erupt and wipe us out, that if I died there, would I be in heaven or hell? And I couldn't answer that question for any
Mhm.
certainty. And so my prayer was, Lord, if you're real, help us get out of here. And then that's when I had that vision of Jesus. And then in that cave, once we were in the cave, I remember my dad gave me this little tiny pocket Bible before I went in. I'd forgotten about it till that moment. And so I pulled it out, and I wanted like to read something that was going to be encouraging, like you will be rescued in your day of disaster or something like that. But instead, I opened up and said, for your sake, we are considered as sheep to be slaughtered all the day long.
Oh,
That
no.
was not very encouraging.
No.
But I
Wow.
went on, and it said, nothing, neither height nor depth nor all of creation will be able to separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus our Lord. And from that moment on, after that experience, encountering the vision with Jesus and that scripture, I had total peace no matter what happened, whether I lived or I died, that I would be with the Lord. And so that really shaped my life and my faith in that moment right there.
And you
And
made a
then
pledge somewhere along the way during that prayer time. Was that when that
Yeah,
happened?
and then so the next day we're trying to hike out of there, but we're still 22 miles away from anything. And here we that night there was an avalanche came down, almost buried us. A large mud flow came down off the mountain, just the unstable ash. And so we had to scurry out of there, and then we had to hike, freezing cold, soaking wet again. And we found another little cave of trees. And so we were able to crawl into that. And I remember staring at the fire there, and it was getting late in the day again. This is the fourth day that we were trapped in there now. And just thinking, man, are we ever going to get out of here? I remember staring at the fire and thinking I was hearing the whir of a helicopter. And it's like a mental image of a helicopter came to my mind. So I jumped out of this little cave. First time the fog had lifted a little bit and looked down this valley. And for the first time, we could see down the bottom of the valley. And it's 2,000 feet below us. And I saw a Huey helicopter go up the valley, another one following it. And then I saw them leave, and they were leaving out to the left. And when I saw them leave, I just saw a chance of us ever getting out of there, maybe even alive, go with them. And that's when I fell down on my hands and knees and said, Lord, I'm 20 years old. I'll dedicate the rest of my life to serving you if you get us out of this mess that we got ourselves into. And so I'm not sure how much time went on, but I heard this audible voice speak to me. And all it said was, Michael, look up to your left. And it scared me. I looked around. There's nobody standing around me. And I looked over to my left, and sure enough, I saw all the broken trees. And one of them, the branches were broken in the shape of a cross. And that's where I saw the helicopter rise right over where that cross was. And they looked like angels coming out of the sky, those helicopters. A Huey helicopter followed by another one. And they came over and saw me standing out there, and they hovered, dropped down some flares, and they took off. They had to go find a safe place to land because we're on a hillside. And so they found a place, and these pararescue guys came down, these big orange flight jackets, and they gave us great big bear hugs, said, you don't know how happy we are to find you. I said, you want to make a bet? They had been pulling out body bags. We were the first live rescues that they were able to do there.
Oh,
And
wow.
that was Air Force Rescue. And I'm just so thankful for them and how they risked their lives even to come up and find us, because there was a tight weather window that they could fly in and see if we were still alive or not. The military had called my mother, said, your son is missing and presumed dead. She started a prayer chain. And so she had gone through all of this, not knowing whether we were alive or not. My dad was out fishing the whole time. He didn't even know any of this until he came home.
Really?
There was news vehicles everywhere.
Oh, man.
But anyways, they said we have to hurry to get out of here because there's another storm coming in. And if we don't get out of here, we're going to all be spending the night here. So as those helicopters lifted off from Mount St. Helens, I just sensed the Lord saying to me that this wasn't for me. This is so that His name would be glorified. And that was really the beginning of my hearing the voice of the Lord. I think He was drawing me at a very early age, and He drew me to Mount St. Helens because of the things that He wanted to teach me about life and faith, and really hearing the voice of the Lord and how important that would be for the rest of my life. And He's certainly done that, in every aspect, every step of my life.
So you're now home, or you're off the mountain anyway. How does life look like? I mean, obviously it was a tremendous relief, and also, like you say, a kind of coming to Jesus and really getting to know Him and having a serious relationship with the Lord. But the next steps in real life, what did that look like? Were you on the news? Were people talking to you? Was there a hubbub about your experience there? How did that look?
Yeah, it was thank you for asking that question. It was very humbling coming off of that, because here we've been trapped in there for 4 days, and we have been put on the missing and presumed dead list. And they didn't see any way we could have survived that second eruption. But by the grace of God, it was just a vertical eruption, not vertical and horizontal like the first one. But they were just learning all of this at that time. When we finally were taken to the rescue center, the air rescue team read our vitals and said we were very fortunate to be out of there, because we could not have probably survived another night, probably with hypothermia or whatever. It was just, the weather was really bad. It was it was snowing actually. So it's freezing up there. And everybody on the team went back to Seattle, but I stayed in Portland, Oregon, because I was the cameraman, and the producer worked out a deal with ABC News and told them that if they cleaned his cameras, that they could have the exclusive first look at our footage. And they said, Michael, since you shot the footage, you need to go to Portland and help them edit that. Here we had just been through this ordeal, hadn't eaten anything for 4 days.
Oh
And yet I
man.
had to go to Portland, Oregon to help them edit the film for the news that night, which they did. They finally gave me a hamburger. And then they put me up in a hotel. And that next morning, there was the whole hallway was filled with news reporters because Portland was where all the major news outlets had their headquarters in covering Mount St. Helens, and we were the latest news. We were the new missing hikers that were found, and we had all this footage that we had just shot of what it was like to walk around in there from the ground. And so they asked me what it was like, and I was still in shock. It was really hard to put words together until one of the reporters came in the room and said, I know you had a spiritual experience there, and I want to hear about it. This was a network news reporter. And so it kind of unlocked that opportunity for me to begin sharing what it was like, the humbling experience that it was. It was very humbling. And the thing is that, all my life I'd been wanting to go to Hollywood to make movies, but none of that mattered anymore. All I wanted to do was get to know the Lord and this newfound faith that I had found there. Even though I've been a Christian, I really didn't know a personal relationship with Jesus. And I always say that, don't wait till you have a Mount St. Helens experience or, a major catastrophe in your life. Get to know Jesus before that happens, because he'll use opportunities like that to help us. But and for me, it's like a milestone. It's like the Lord telling Israel to leave memorial stones there so they won't forget. We still forget, and we still have to be reminded. But
Yeah.
it's a memorial stone that I'll never forget. And and every opportunity I have to share it reminds me of that too. And now I get to tell this story to my grandchildren and hopefully my children's children's children, my great grandchildren someday, about what God did in my life there. And it seems like every night when they come and stay over or I'm with them, they always want me to tell them the volcano story. And I'm like, don't you get tired of that? No, Papa, your story is always new every time.
Yeah, yeah. And so the question of the day is, did you keep your melted boots? Do you have those as a
No, I was going to. I had them all wrapped in a plastic bag, but my dad smelled them one time. They smelled so awful that he threw them in the garbage.
Wow. So the good segue is this large family. It's kind of a part of your spiritual journey. So when did the documentary actually come out?
1995 is when it came out. Yeah, 15 years after the eruption. Yeah.
And you'd gotten married before in that period of time to your wife Sherry,
Yep.
who is not only your wife, but she's also your partner, and she's the mother of 9.
Yep.
And you're the father of 9. So tell us how that kind of impacted your life and the faith aspect of that.
So right after that experience in Mount St. Helens, I had an opportunity. I was offered a lot of jobs. I guess television people like crazy people like me that will go in and film an active volcano or something. But one of those was Pat Robertson. He invited me to share my story in the 700 Club, and then he hired me to be his West Coast producer. And I saw it as an opportunity for my faith to grow, and it certainly did. So for the next 7 years, I traveled almost nonstop filming stories about faith. And so I heard all kinds of stories, and I really, really grew in my relationship with the Lord in that time. And one of those stories was Graham Kerr, the former Galloping Gourmet. And Graham asked me what I was going to do when I was done with, well, at that time, I was also working for a television show out of Japan, and we were doing biography documentaries on world leaders. And his show, The Galloping Gourmet, was one of the top 10 shows in Japan. And so he wanted me to come and work with him, and he was working with a missions group called Youth with a Mission. And so I prayed, do I go to New York or to LA, where some friends want me to come and work with them in a new studio they were developing there, or Tacoma, Washington? And I just sensed the Lord saying to go to Tacoma, Washington. That was where my destiny was. And not that film was in Tacoma, but my life was really about the Lord and listening to what he wanted me to do in my life. I surrendered my life to him there in Mount St. Helens. And so I ended up moving to Tacoma. And then a year or so after moving there, I met my wife, and she was looking for an internship. She was just graduate degree in broadcast journalism. So she became the best intern I ever had, and I had to marry her. So we were married in 1987. And then we just felt like God called us together to do projects together because she loved telling stories of God also. And so for the first 3 years, that's what we did. We traveled and produced films and television shows and like that. But then, we got convicted that God did just call us together to do projects, but to have a family. And so our firstborn was born, and he was such a blessing. And then we wanted to have more kids, and we saw that children were a blessing. We had our second, Anna, and then we had a third and fourth. And by that time, we were getting older in our lives. And we thought we were praying for a twin when we were having our fourth one, and that didn't happen. But one night, my wife was nursing the baby, and she was just bawling in tears. I said, "What's wrong, honey?" She said, "There's millions of babies all over the world that are crying with no mama to come and pick them up and feed them." So she says, "We have to adopt one or two." And so we had just had our fourth. So we looked into adopting one or two, but then this opportunity came up, a sibling set of four. And when we started the adoption process, became five children because the state couldn't tell us about the baby, that they were still working on the paperwork. So we said, of course, we can't leave a sibling behind. So worked out for us to adopt these five beautiful children from foster care in Oregon. And so we went from 4 to 9, literally in one day. That was 23 years ago. And we brought them home on Thanksgiving Day in 2002.
So what's the age range of the nine?
Yeah, so they were all between, well, ages about 1.5 by that time to age about 9 or 10 was our oldest. Yeah, and they were all within that same range. So it was like we had three sets of twins, among the five that we had just adopted. And so our lives were very full with that. And that took a lot of faith for me. I'm like, well, we have a minivan that can hold 7. How do we get a van big enough for 11? So we ended up getting a 15 passenger van. I felt like a school bus driver. And then we continued to, really, we tried to include our family in all of our projects and things that we did. And we did a lot of road trips with our family and in doing filming, not just volcanoes and earthquakes, but also we got quite involved in racial reconciliation. It was something God really put on my heart very, very young, when I was very young, and something that I wanted to see that happen. I wanted to see racial healing happen in our nation. I had seen examples of that, and I just longed to see that happen. I had worked on a biography documentary on Alex Haley. You may remember he was the gentleman that wrote the book Roots, about his great grandfather Kunta Kinte, who had
Yeah.
come to America in chains when he was only 14 years old, and that really impacted me. Just spending time with him, and we got to not only go to his studio in L.A. but to his home in Arkansas, where we got to learn more about his story. And I'll never forget, he told me it was his dream to someday see healing and reconciliation. I had no idea what that meant, but I was gripped by that thought, healing and reconciliation. And then, we had the LA riots break out in the early 90s. And, we just saw racial healing was not happening. It was really a lot of trouble in our nation, but I saw a pathway biblically for that. And so when I saw Christian groups doing things that they could with not just prayer, but also just making a genuine, heartfelt apology, and how much that meant to people to unlock that anger and that bitterness and that hate, to learn how to forgive and to start all over again. Because really, reconciliation is not the right word. We can't reconcile back to what never was. We need to reconcile to what God's original intention was. So it's really getting back to God's original intention for all the different people groups and races and cultures of the world. Really, that's God's heart. And so it really gripped me, and it was something that we did a lot of in our lives. Yeah.
And this was kind of a new branch. You had Global Net, and this was LifeNet, right? And so this was kind of a whole spin-off from your production company.
Yeah. Global Net Production, I started a long time ago. Back when I was like 17 years old or something. And then, and that's why I done all of my documentaries and like the films on disasters and disaster preparedness. But then when we started doing this reconciliation work, it was more of a Christian ministry. And so people wanted to donate to help us with this. And so we need to set up a 501c3 nonprofit. So we still have that, and that's lifenetmedia.org is our website for that, where you can see our documentaries about racial healing.
Yeah, and we'll put that in the show notes here too, so people could just click on it and help out and support in any way they choose. So that'll be great. You kind of became a student of geologic disasters, if you will, and then you went to Hawaii and spent some time there filming Kilauea, the active volcano there. We just kind of drawn to go see what was going on and kind of add to the story from Mount St. Helens.
Yeah, back when I was in junior high, I had a geology teacher who would show us films in school of volcanoes erupting. They're mostly lava and lava flows, and I was just because I was interested in cinematography and that I wanted to someday see a lava flow, and so different than Mount St. Helens. And I was actually probably drawn to Mount St. Helens thinking I was going to see lava flow, but there wasn't any. It was all ash, totally
Yeah.
different kind of volcano. So in 2012, my wife and I celebrated our 25th wedding anniversary actually, and our children sent us to Hawaii. That's where we had gotten engaged as a surprise. And it was there that we met David Cunningham, and he had the Film Institute there. And he invited us to come and work with him in films that he was working on there. And so we prayed about it as a family, and thought it'd be a great opportunity to get our children and more involved in kind of some missions work too, because this was with Youth with a Mission there in Kailua Kona. And so we moved our whole family there in 2012, and we were only going to be there 2 years. But during those 2 years, so much was happening. Our children got really involved in school there. So we ended up staying there for 7 years. And during that 7 years there, the Kilauea volcano erupted, and it wiped out over 700 homes. It was quite a big eruption. And so we were there covering a lot of that with my camera, and ended up doing some films about that volcanic eruption. And since Mount St. Helens, I came out of that wondering what happened, how did it happen, how did it catch us off guard, will it happen again? And so, people were asking me a question: could this ever happen to Mount Rainier, let's say? So I did a film called Fire Mountains of the West that explored all those. And while I was doing that film, I met a volcanologist who changed from volcanology to seismology. And I was like really confused by that, because what do earthquakes have to do with volcanoes? I thought they were totally different systems. But he said that Mount St. Helens had caught them off guard, and they had to look into why it was such a big eruption, because they felt like the subduction plate that was fueling these volcanoes was somewhat slippery and not building a lot of friction and building up the magma underneath the ground. So they had to start looking into that. And what they discovered was that in the Pacific Northwest, we have magnitude 9+ earthquakes every 150 to 500 years. Now, that's the average span between these earthquakes. And the last one happened January 26, 9 p.m., 1700. And it generated a 9+ earthquake that shook 4 to 6 minutes. And it probably killed 100,000 or more Native American people on the coastline at that time because of the tsunamis that were generated. So I did a film called Cascadia, the Hidden Fire, that tells that story about the discovery of these mega earthquakes here in the Pacific Northwest, and ran it on PBS. And 2 weeks later, the Indian Ocean earthquake tsunami happened, killing over 300,000 people. And people were asking the question, could this ever happen in America? And I just released this film. So PBS reran it, and it became the highest rated film in Science Night in PBS history, because people were fascinated with this story that this just happened in Indonesia. Now it could happen here in America someday.
Yeah.
So I felt like my experience in Mount St. Helens was my duty to help warn people about volcanic and seismic and geologic hazards. So again, when we were in Hawaii, we were trying to help people understand the threat of lava flows. And, over 7, in fact, 3 of those homes were friends of ours that lost their homes there. And then I did a series of films for the Smithsonian Institute called Vol Films that you can find on YouTube. And they're about volcanic hazards and how you can prepare for volcanic hazards if you live in in volcanic areas, which we do
Mhm.
right here in the Northwest. We have volcanoes all over us, from
Yeah, there's a
uh,
huge one right over there.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's called Mount Rainier.
Yeah. Yeah. So, one more faith question regarding. So you came from a father who was a scientist. You hang out with scientists. You follow volcanoes, which is a science-based um, entity, and yet faith and science sometimes are at loggerheads with one another because supposedly the earth was created in 7 days. And you probably know that that probably didn't happen in 7 days. How do you justify that?
Yeah, well, I do get asked this question often, but what I witnessed, I was so close to what was happening there, and to me, I saw a huge catastrophe happen, and it happened so quickly. From March 1980 till May, when the big eruption happened, and I saw things happen very rapidly there, but I can't say that all Earth processes happen that same way because I don't know. God doesn't give us all the details about that, about how he did this. He tells us the sequence and how he made them, but we don't know exactly how long it took him to do. I mean, he's God. He's eternal. He can take all the time that he wants to in the world, to create this special place. I love planet Earth. I just everywhere I travel, I'm just fascinated with the differences and just the geography and really and how people have adapted to the geography of where they live and how it's formed people and formed nations, even. And it's just fascinating to look at, it's kind of step back from it. That's what I had to do at Mount St. Helens. I had to kind of step back from it and then think about what had happened to me and all those other people that had either survived there or lost their lives there, it kind of gave me a unique perspective in all of that.
Yeah.
And so, it's a really fascinating thing to think about how God may have created the universe and created this special planet for his special creation, which was us, to
Yeah.
enjoy this place. And I
Yeah.
certainly enjoy living here in the Northwest. I've traveled all over the world, but I have to say this is still my favorite place to live. Even after living in Hawaii, I love to go visit Hawaii, but I still love living here in the Northwest.
Yeah, me too. Me too. So, this has been fascinating. And there were some things here that I was going to talk about, but we're running long. And this story is just so amazing. And your life's work is incredible. And I really appreciate your taking the time. We're going to send people off to with a link to go see the documentary. I think there's a small charge for it or whatever, but give them that opportunity and to look at your website and to look at the LifeNet website as well. And is there any specific ways that we can support you other than donations are probably always accepted at LifeNet? Anything else, prayer or anything you're working on that we can pray for?
Yeah, I covet your prayers always. We're still working hard and the assignments that we sense the Lord is giving us. And we're working on updating some of our racial reconciliation projects. So prayer for that strategy and for funding, to help us to really get that story out because I think there's a lot of confusion about racism and racial issues that really there's only one answer is Jesus and really the Word of God in how we should live and get along. And I just would love to see more of that message get out. And even within the church, I think there's some confusion with that too. And then with the other work that we do, when we were raising our family, we were interested in what that generation of children were watching and consuming. And at that time, a lot of supernatural content was coming out, and still this day seems to be the thing that really attracts kids, especially in their formative years when they're trying to form their worldview, like for me when I was young. And so we sense to do a TV series on the supernatural, and we want to really help people understand what that is and look into areas like the paranormal, like Bigfoot and UFOs, and what are those things, or what are the things that are things we don't see, or maybe sometimes we do see. And what is that? So we're working on a supernatural series called Even the Darkness,
Mm,
and that's another project that we're working on, and we have a website for that too. and love for people to see the trailer and, support us in that way too.
What's the website address for that?
That's eventhedarkness.com.
Okay. All right. Well, do you have a favorite scripture verse, a life verse that you retreat to from time to time, or not?
Yeah, lots of them.
Yeah.
Because the Lord has been so good to me in, so many ways.
Yeah.
But Psalm 104, verse 32 is, just shows how personal God can be. He looks at the earth and it trembles. He touches mountains and they smoke. You can't be any more clear about that being a volcano.
Yeah.
I think that David, if he wrote that psalm, witnessed a volcano erupting and he saw God's finger on that. And I feel like that's what I witnessed too, and just that he's a very personal God. He's right there with us no matter what we're going through. And he loves to communicate with us. He loves it when we just stop and listen. When we listen, he wants to tell us things. He wants to tell us how much he loves us and how much he cares for us and how he'll see us through whatever we're going through, whether it be a volcanic eruption and we're confused and in the dark about it and we're scared, we think we're going to die. But God is right there waiting to just carry us under the shadow of his wings. Psalm 91 is another one of those that I look at often whenever I doubt things or I get scared. There's just so many good verses.
Yeah. Well, Michael Lienau, so great to meet you. So great to have this time to talk and to share your story. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you, Rick. Appreciate the opportunity. God bless you and all that you're doing too.
Oh man, what an amazing career and a life story. Wow. Award-winning cinematographer, director of the internationally renowned documentary on the Mount St. Helens eruption, a Jesus follower for sure, and a father of 9. Michael Lienau on Amazing Greats. For more amazing stories like this, hit subscribe and follow us. Thanks for sharing Amazing Greats and for the likes and reviews. God bless.